Welcome to the Irish NFL Show's Week 7 Monday recap in association with our partner QuinnBet. In Week 7, the Jags finished their 2-week stay in London with a much-needed win at Wembley. The Chiefs are the last men standing with an unbeaten record as they beat the 49ers in a Super Bowl rematch. That they are the last team standing because the Lions ended the Vikings' own winning streak, and the Packers made things even more interesting in the NFC North as they leaned on a new-look defense to take down the Texans at Lambeau. We'll talk about all that and much more over the next hour. Let's welcome Kieran Boyle, Noel Dowling and Brian O'Leary alongside myself, Conor Brophy, to chop up Week 7 with you. And we start with the Chiefs win in that Super Bowl rematch, Noel, where it was nowhere near as close as it was in Allegiant Stadium. The Chiefs won this one pulling away.
They did, and it's one of those games where, you know, you're kind of wondering what the Chiefs can do going away to the 49ers, who, you know, a lot of us thought may win the Super Bowl last year, and the people think could go back again, but they've had a tough season so far, and the Chiefs go in there, and unfortunately for Brock Purdy, he has a tough game. Obviously, you look at a lot of injuries for the 49ers, which plays into it, and then Ayuk goes out during the game. But still, Purdy was put under a lot of pressure by a Spagnuolo defense that really got him running, and he made some poor decisions. And on the flip side, you have an Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes setup that just seems to steamroll teams, no matter who is on their team, no matter who's out for them. They find guys to come in, next man up. And I mean, I just look at this Chiefs team and I wonder, for whatever reason, they don't feel overly impressive to me. But then you see them go out and beat teams, and you just wonder, like, what do teams need to do to actually beat this Chiefs team? Now, as I say, we know on defense they're just up there with the best in terms of Spagnuolo's defense and what he can do. They have a really good secondary. But still, like, I don't know. You just look at this team and you wonder, can people actually stop them? Because when they get going, they just seem to smother teams and do what they need to do. And even yesterday, Mahomes doesn't have statistically a great game. A couple of interceptions, no touchdowns, not a big amount of yards by any stretch of the imagination. But when you need him to pop up with a play or to do something meaningful to push that game forward, he can do it. And then the 49ers, I mean, it's hard to see what they can do. We talked about McCaffrey missing, obviously big player. We talked about how they miss him in different facets of the game. It's not just a running back; it's a running back who can double up in the passing game and can make plays that other players just can't make. And then when you add on Deebo Samuel, Ayuk, as mentioned, you know, Jennings, it's just a lot on this 49ers team to overcome, and it's going to be interesting to see now going forward if they have the players that can step up and make a difference. And that's for the Chiefs. As I say, what do you do? What do you do with this team? They just keep rolling.
Kieran, has Noel's touched on a lot of the points there from a Chiefs perspective, but looking at the 49ers, they look so far off being the class of the NFC, and Kyle Shanahan does not have the answers to whatever Steve Spagnuolo can throw at him. The Chiefs are now 4-0 against the Niners when Spags has been the defensive coordinator. You can talk about too high safety all you want. You take the quarterback out of the game, you don't have an offense, and Spags just had Birdie in the blender all day long.
I mean, that was a masterclass from Spagnuolo yesterday. I mean, the only guy that could stop Bill Belichick back in the day was Spagnuolo, and just the schemes that he pulled up. I mean, first half they just swamped Purdy. It was man coverage. I mean, Purdy had nobody to throw to, and we'll go into the injuries in a little bit. But between the corner and the safety blitz, just all the disguises that Spagnuolo put out there, Purdy never looked comfortable. And it's, you heard the sound bites from Shanahan saying that they just sucked yesterday, and they just played bad. They played as well as they could with the injuries they have. I mean, that, like Noel said, I mean, losing the players of the caliber that they have, and they had to put out Jacob Cowing, a guy that got shot about 6 weeks ago, and a guy called Gorendo, who's out there trying to make plays. And I've been critical of Purdy in the past. I think he did as much as he could do yesterday. Between Spagnuolo calling up those plays and the lack of weapons, I mean, again, we've talked about the absence of McCaffrey. That's been a huge detriment to this offense. It started with him, and now it's kind of the trickle effect, losing Deebo. Ayuk is most likely done for a good chunk of the season, if not the whole season. I think that's it was a knee injury, I think I heard. And Jennings being out too. So they were very limited on offense even to start the game before you're going up against something like Spagnuolo, almost like, the the mad professor pulling out all these plays and confusing and making Purdy run around and throwing, he ended up throwing 3 interceptions. But I mean, it's troubling times in San Francisco. Nobody had them down at 3-4 at this time of the season. It's are they going to be able to tread water in, not alone in the conference, but in that division? Because it's going to be the other teams making hay with the Seahawks and the Rams, but it's really troubling for the Niners now. And the windows, again, we talk about the windows. This is most likely the last one for the Niners before all those players on offense depart, or at least the majority of them anyway.
Brian, if we'd said at the start of the season that the Chiefs would have been the last undefeated team in Week 7, I don't think anybody would have been massively surprised. If you'd said that Patrick Mahomes is playing some of the worst football he's played in his career and the Chiefs are still 6-0, you'd have been very, very surprised. Again, as Noel has touched on, he wasn't brilliant yesterday. One particularly bad pick, one where Xavier Worthy falls over, you can probably forgive him. But again, he's still able to show up in big moments with big plays. He had that scramble down the touchline where he masterfully, depending on your look at it, or disingenuously took advantage of the NFL's don't touch the quarterback when he's going out of bounds rule.
Yeah, but he has a habit of doing this. It's not a coincidence, kind of in crucial moments and crucial games. I think one of the social tweets we put out last night, third down, it's Mahomes. Well, it's Mahomes, as in he just knows, he has a knack at the most crucial time. I reflect on 2 Super Bowls, not to get away from this game, but you think of the Eagles Super Bowl in which he had a 25-yard run to essentially wrap up the game, and he did something very similar last year in overtime, and they were identical plays. And yes, yet again he scrambles for not just the bigger one, but there was one earlier on in the game as well on a crucial third down, and then there was another play on a 3rd and 8 in the 4th quarter where he gets like eye the needle stuff. He's got 2 players coming in him, and he still finds a way to navigate a pass, and ultimately then he's the one who scores the touchdown. This is the difference. Purdy's in the red zone.
He's running over guys now, so he's throwing picks, but he'll truck a guy to go into the end zone if the team needs him to do it.
This is what he's been doing over the course of the season. We saw it in LA against the Chargers when they were 10 points down. He puts the team on their back. We're not playing well offensively. Our defense are holding us in the game, and we'll make plays where we need to bring us back into games, and obviously to put games away yesterday. That's the defining piece of this. He's a quarterback who knows how to make crucial plays at crucial times in the game. Brock Purdy's in the red zone twice yesterday. Well, the first time was slightly outside the red zone, but it's a poor pass, completely misread by the wide receiver Bell, and then obviously the one in the red zone late in the game when it looked like the 49ers were coming back into the game, and it looked like when the 49ers had an opportunity to take hold of the game. Mistakes are made. Mahomes doesn't make them. Okay, he's had a few interceptions, but by and large, crucial times in the game, he finds a way to. And the run summed it up. To go on that play in your icon, they should have got him out of bounds, but this is the nature of the NFL right now. We're seeing players go down the perimeter. Bengals on a kickoff return. Van Ginkel in London. They just don't want to put players out of bounds.
He kind of fakes going out of bounds. And look, we saw the Bengals denied a chance to go to the Super Bowl because of a late hit on Mahomes at a crucial moment in a big game. Quarterback's going out of bounds. You're thinking, if I touch him now, this is a big penalty on top of what's already a long run. So he took advantage of it. There's no doubt he did. I mean, I'm sure the safety is now thinking I should have just gone for him.
It's a difficulty across the league. We're seeing it time and time again where players were slightly out of bounds, and the minute they're touched, you see players on the sideline continuously calling for flags. It's very difficult for the safety. He's not in a position like us to watch a replay or to know exactly where the player's footing is. He has to make a split decision. Yesterday, he probably felt Mahomes was going to do the sensible thing and secure his body, go out of bounds. And Mahomes saw the bigger picture, which was to keep on going and get as many yards as they can and put ourselves in a position to ultimately put the game away. It's a big win for the Chiefs. They've got some stellar, bigger games to come again. But the 49ers have got the Cowboys next week, and a Cowboys team who are struggling right now coming off a bye week. It's going to make for a nice game next Sunday. Is it Sunday Night Football this one? It is Sunday Night Football. Yeah, it's a big game in Santa Clara next week for both sides.
A team that didn't put the game away late, and we'll talk about the Packers in a moment, the team that did in that game was the Texans, Kieran. We've had a lot of positive talk about DeMeco Ryans, and we're big fans of DeMeco and everything he's done on the show, and you can't take that away from him, but didn't have the best of nights in Lambeau.
That was a tough one. That was a tough one for the Texans yesterday. They're going through a rocky patch right now. A lot of us are high on their chances this year. And they're still in a good spot, 5-2, nice record still. But there's kind of cloudy warning signs up ahead. That was a very poor performance from Stroud yesterday. 86 total yards, took 4 sacks. And there's something not right about this offense right now. We talked about when Mixon was out, how they weren't, they were kind of limited. Now Mixon's back, and if it wasn't for him, I mean, he had those 2 touchdowns. If it wasn't for him, they have not a lot. I think 8 points. But the other issue is the wide receiver combo that I've been kind of high on all season. Tank Dell had 0 catches, 0 yards yesterday, and I think Diggs had 23 yards in total. So that's the issue now. I know the Texans had a lot of injuries on defense. They were missing Mario Edwards and Kamari Lassiter, but that offense is not humming. There's something going on right now, and if this is the kind of bumpy stretch in the season that they're going to have to endure, well, they're going to have to get right pretty soon, because somebody like Tank Dell not making any catches, and they missed Nico Collins tremendously. This team is not the same without him out there. It was a really tough kind of watch for them, and seeing Stroud struggle too, because we haven't really seen him struggle based on from last year and even the early part of this year. But that's what quarterbacks are going to have to go through in this league. You're going to have to perform when the rest of the team is not performing, and he's still young enough in his career that he's going to have to go through those learning phases and learning struggles. But he's going to have to start pulling this team together, because they can't afford to go much more behind. They want to wrap up this AFC South pretty soon. They're still in a commanding position, but they also have to think about the conference. I'm concerned for the Texans right now. Concerned for some of the play calling yesterday, but overall the performance of those skill players. I mean, I don't know where Diggs' head was yesterday. He decided to pick a fight. He's got a long-standing beef with Jair Alexander, but he decided to take on the whole Packers team before the game yesterday. I don't know what that's about, but it just seems like there's a lack of focus right now. Stroud is still young.
If you're going to do that, Kieran, go and get yourself 100 yards and a touchdown. Don't come out and have four targets for 0 catches and no yards.
Yeah, and I mean, Diggs has said in the post game that he's never going to be the bigger man. He's never going to be the bigger person. So that's the kind of selfish attitude and the selfish kind of ways that he's always portrayed in his career. And that's going to be a struggle for Stroud to kind of reel in. He's still not too far removed from being a rookie. So these are going to be challenging times, from challenging weeks ahead, especially, when we get into the real business end of the season. So maybe might be some cracks in that offensive production right now for Houston.
Brian, the Packers did win that game, handed over kicking duties to a new kicker who certainly didn't let them down in the big moment. But probably 2 things that were striking about this from a Green Bay perspective, I thought. Firstly is that, and we were talking about this when we were previewing the game, Jordan Love has been a bit reckless with the football this year. Again, we saw picks, we saw him putting the ball at risk. He's kind of channeling Brett Favre a little bit more than Aaron Rodgers, who was notably fastidious with the football when he was in Green Bay. But we also saw the Packers defense step up in a big way. The other side of CJ Stroud having trouble is, a masterful performance from Green Bay's defense all around, who dialed up. They were blitz heavy, and they seemed to be confusing him. They got to him 4 times. They put him on his back, and that is really what ultimately won the game for Green Bay. It wasn't necessarily explosive offensive production this time around.
I'll start with Jordan Love. Yeah, he stepped up in big moments yesterday, obviously in particular the last drive, but you're right, he's been careless with the ball. Like, it doesn't. Some of the interceptions aren't all on him. And I mean, he's got a rate. I think it's 8 for the season now, and he's up there with Minshew.
Up there with Mahomes.
Yeah, he's up there with Mahomes, but obviously Mahomes has a way of getting these one over the line. And in fairness to the Packers and Jordan Love, they got over the line yesterday. I know we touched on it briefly, and you kind of alluded to it. I don't think it was helped by, like, CJ Stroud struggled yesterday in certain parts, but ultimately, for me, it looked and it felt like he was still going to find a way to navigate a game-winning drive. And then I felt it was a mismanagement of the game clock there in terms of throwing when 3rd down. When it, for me, the most fruitful thing was to run the ball, kill another 40 seconds off the clock, and make the Packers use their last time out. And they didn't go that, which is very striking of what we saw on the reverse of the Texans a couple of weeks ago with the Bills. But it was, for me, it was weird because it felt like there was 2 game-winning drives in the sense. CJ Stroud has had a difficult day. He's been harassed throughout the course of the game. He struggled as Kieran's alluded to. Like, you look at some of the stats and you called out, like, Diggs' numbers were so low yesterday. Other players weren't catching the ball. Their own game was affected for large parts. Thought the Packers got control of that, which ultimately allowed the Packers to get back in the game. And Brandon McManus, who's been out of the league for quite some time, has had his own controversial storylines going on, which is the way he wasn't in the league. Comes up and kicks a game-winning field goal, but not necessarily just a game-winning field goal, because he kicked it and then he got iced by a timeout, and he still managed to kick the resulting field goal. It's a big win for the Packers. I thought the Texans would have had enough to get over the line. I felt like that was the way it was going to play out, that the Texans right now are just a little bit beyond the Packers. But it's a big win for the Packers, and I know we're going to get into the Lions Vikings in the second segment because of the nature of this division. And the Bears have a big one this weekend, and saw some great gimmicks today on the Bears. Are bottom of the division, yet they're 4-2, and Bears fans are pulling their hair out. But it's the nature. It's a great division this year. It really is. It's really enjoyable.
No, we talked about the 49ers struggles, which has kind of opened the door for the Seahawks, who ended their losing streak, winning big in Atlanta in the end. Wouldn't have liked to have seen DK Metcalf get carted off, which was a concern, although it doesn't look like, according to what the initial reports are on that knee injury, that's as bad as it initially looked. But it's certainly not as bad as Atlanta's pass rush looked, which Raheem Morris was calling out as the big glaring weakness in their team. There were other weaknesses exposed by Seattle too, though.
Where, I mean, yeah, look, this Atlanta defense was always a question mark for me going in, and whether or not they would have that pass rush available to really trouble teams. I felt offensively they may be able to have enough firepower there to really put teams away if they had the chance, if their defense could just kind of step up. But so far it really hasn't been the case. But to be honest, I'm not overly sold on the offense now itself either, which seems to be a bit hit or miss depending on what week Cousins is kind of feeling, how he is. It's been a kind of a tough slog for the Falcons. But you mentioned the Seahawks there, and what a massive win for them, especially as you say, given the 49ers result. I mean, the Seahawks were on a three-game losing streak. They really needed to step it up after a tough week against the Giants last week, and they did. I thought they got good balance between Kenneth Walker and the pass game. They were able to just do a job on the Falcons, and I thought it might be a close game and the Falcons win, but I didn't see the Seahawks offense really stepping up in the way they did and putting 34 on them. So hopefully for the Seahawks, it's kind of a sign of things to come, that maybe, they can stabilize things a bit and put a run in, because as we say, we don't know what the 49ers are at the moment, especially with those injuries and that division having looked like it was a one-horse race. Now, realistically, could be there for someone like the Seahawks to sneak in and take it.
It is an interesting division, actually, Kieran, as Noel says, because we would have thought that the 49ers might streak ahead with it. Seahawks can lose 3 games in a row and still end up on top of that division now, 4-3. Actually, even the Cardinals and the Rams aren't out of it.
Yeah, hugely impressive win for Seattle, coming over to the East Coast and winning we talk about those 1 o'clock games for the West Coast teams as being a disadvantage. It didn't really seem like that yesterday. Yeah, I mean, I had the Falcons yesterday just based on the fact that the Falcons have been, humming along nicely on offense with that mix of the run of the pass game. And it did show, early signs of, Atlanta going back in that kind of rhythm again. But Seattle really came to play yesterday. I mean, they've been waiting for Kenneth Walker to erupt. They've been waiting for a big performance from him all season, and he finally did it. A team that's lost 3 games on the slide, they needed that win yesterday. But what I'm impressed with is Walker showing up. 2 touchdowns on his birthday. He wasn't feeling well apparently, so all those kind of variables involved there too. And DK doing DK things. I mean, he gets a lot of bad press. He's a very interesting character, especially on the field. But some of the plays he's able to make, he's a freak of nature. I mean, there's Megatron comparisons, obviously, but he's just an absolute beast of a wide receiver. And if you throw the ball up anywhere near him, he's likely to make some really impressive catches. And but when you have somebody like Walker and DK Metcalf on offense, and even Smith and Jigba making, in that slot area too, you've always got a chance. But I didn't really give the Seattle Seahawks much chance based on their, 0-3 the last 3 weeks, but very impressive. They did everything right. Defense, they really roughed up Cousins. I mean, Cousins was knocked around. I think he had 2 interceptions and 3 sacks by the end of the game, and he was bloodied and beaten. And that's what you're going to get with Cousins. You're going to get 500-yard, 400-yard games, but you're going to get a couple of stinkers along the way. I'm not overly, concerned about Atlanta going forward in that division, but it's definitely a really nice win for Seattle, especially coming on the road.
Brian, you had a point you wanted to make about the Seahawks.
Yeah, well, I'll double down on something that Kieran said, but for me, this team is evolving in the sense that it's Kenneth Walker's team for me. I know Geno Smith has all the accolades and numbers this year of one of the best quarterbacks for yards passing this season. But you look at week 1 against the Broncos, he had 102 yards, but he had 80 yards in the third quarter. And he couldn't move the ball last week against the 49ers on the Thursday night. And it just makes a hell of a difference when you have him in the backfield. He's a huge key to this team now. Like we see, and Kieran's called, he wasn't well yesterday. He still scores 2 touchdowns. This for me was supposed to be the Bijan Robinson type of game, and in fact, it's Kenneth Walker on the other side that comes out with the victory. I know me and you did select the Seahawks, Connor, because as Kieran said, Cousins does these type of games. He was due that kind of bad game, and we saw a couple of years ago that their secondary, the Seahawks, Kobe Bryant, other players. I know Julian Love went out from the Giants. They made key plays yesterday. They've got some great players in the secondary, and on their day they can make huge plays, which helps the team get a victory. But the Falcons were always chasing yesterday. They don't strike me as that team that chases very well. They need to get out in an early lead. Big win for the Seahawks.
Big win also, Noel, yesterday for the Commanders, who had no trouble whatsoever against the Panthers. Not that anybody particularly predicted that they would. The one black spot on that, though, an injury to Jaden Daniels, who's now listed as week to week. Looks like he'll be okay to play against the Bears this weekend. At least the Commanders are hoping that he will be able to. Marcus Mariota deputized well in his absence, but that question mark is a really big one heading into next week from a Commanders point of view.
It is. I mean, look, we've seen what Jaden Daniels has done all season and how important he's become to the Commanders team. But I mean, I think they're lucky enough. It was against the Panthers when this happened, and as you say, Marcus Mariota is able to slot in seamlessly. Now, unless it's not Daniels, unless it's the system, and Mariota is just showing that he's a system quarterback. Sorry, I'm throwing a grenade.
That's fired. No, jeez, they'll all be coming after us now.
Oh, I know. No. Look, this is a really good Commanders offense. We've talked about the balance they've got in there in terms of the run game and the pass game. Obviously Daniels is a big part of that, but again, we've talked about you don't really need him against the Panthers. It's a bad Panthers team who are just giving up so many points week on week that at some point their heads were bound to drop. There's only so much you can do. But I think we talked about it with the Bears as well. It's a good sign. People may have expected the Commanders to beat them, but if you think you're a good team, it's how you beat them. And they went out there and they did a job. They did exactly what they needed to do. They put up 40 points, and I mean, there's not much else to be said about this, really. The Commanders are a good team. They'll face a lot tougher tests. Hopefully next week will be a tough test for them. But yesterday, they just did what they did against a bad team. And, in the run game, in the passing game, they just dominated. And on defense, it was a nice, handy game with a couple of interceptions there.
I'm flipping a coin here, lads, and I hate to do this to you. One of you gets to dump on the Jets. The other one's going to have to explain what's happened with the Giants. Kieran, I'll let you explain what's going on in the other half of New York, where the curse of the old boy obviously didn't help the Giants at the weekend, but there was lots of other things counting against them as well.
Yeah, it's despondency with the Giants.
Here we go again.
It's another lost season. I mean, Jesus. I mean, what do you do? I mean, I was talking to Noel last night. I could have gone on for about 15 minutes about it. It was that raw. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, there was 7 punts in the first half. Jones, I don't know why they didn't try to run the ball more. Jones was just dropping back and getting smashed. I know that Thomas is out, but you got to be able to put somebody else in there. They put Azudu in there, another Shane draft pick, but they put Azudu in a left tackle who was getting lit up the whole game. I mean, it just shows there's zero faith in Evan Neal to switch over to left tackle right now. That shows how bad his stock has dropped there. Again, it's the same old stuff with the Giants. They've scored 6, 15, 7, and 3 in their 4 home games. That is just pitiful. Jones hasn't scored a touchdown at home since week 17 of 2022 when they wrapped up the wild card against the Colts. I've been talking to some people online, some Giants kind of, online platforms. It almost feels like the bad old days of Shermer and Joe Judge again with a wild card win. That's really it, because there hasn't been much of an advancement anywhere. Mara must be tearing his hair out right now, because as we all remember the Hard Knocks episode when it was Mara going into the office questioning the Saquon move. And I mean, today, 1925 Giants drive, it's going to be somber going on. I was talking to Brian earlier. I think there's going to be a fallout between Shane and Mara after all this. I think Mara is just beside himself. Just not even the fact that they lost Saquon in the off season, but the fact that he came in here and had almost a career day and ran up the most amount of yards an offensive or a running back has put up in a long, long time. He embarrassed the Giants. the Giants embarrass themselves. They're wasting a defense, a really quality defense, who are just going to be gassed going out there every 2 minutes because they're punting every time. This is a bad, very, very bad situation in East Rutherford, and it's going to get even worse before it gets any kind of shade of better. I'm sure Brian's going to. I don't want to take all Brian's thunder, but I'll hand it over to him.
we give you the Jets, Brian, because
no, I'll just throw one in. I won't go too heavy on the Giants. I just want to throw one point in. I read something really good last week around salary caps, and every time there's a player that a team can't get their hands on during free agency, well, we didn't have the cap to make it work, etc. Derrick Henry being probably the one for this offseason, not going to Dallas when everybody thought he was an ideal fit for that team. And people saying, salary cap, can't get these players. But there's decisions behind the salary cap. The reason the Giants couldn't keep hold of Saquon Barkley is because they paid Daniel Jones. That's the reality of the situation. Then the Giants can talk about, we haven't got the money in the Hard Knocks series to keep him and pay him the $38 million. It wasn't a year and a half removed from offering him $11.5 million. The reality is he wasn't there because they gave the contract to the wrong person. They should have given it to him and should have let the quarterback walk. And we probably have a bridge quarterback situation. And we may even have Russell Wilson as a quarterback. And that probably brings us to Sunday Night Football. Nice. Sorry, but I am getting the Jets. I was a bit flabbergasted about this game in a way, Connor, because I watched it this morning.
Brian, sorry to cut across you, but the defining image of this game, and it was probably the last thing that he would have expected and we would have expected going into this one, is the best play Davante Adams made a whole game was tackling Beanie Bishop to prevent him going in for a pick six. Like, that's how bad it was for the Jets.
It was a fantastic play, in fairness.
It's a brilliant tackle. It's the best defensive tackle I've seen from an offensive player since DK Metcalf ran down.
Connor, I genuinely thought you were going down the road of Aaron Rodgers, because Aaron Rodgers was caught eating a few bogeys on the sideline, but there was a few bogeys on the field in the second half for the Jets, because it was a scandalous performance, bearing in mind how comfortable they looked. You know, they've got I wouldn't say they have a substantial lead, but they have a lead going into halftime, which looks like the way in which Russell Wilson came out so cold in the game didn't seem to be lighting it up whatsoever. You read some of the stuff on social this morning, Russell Wilson stinks, and then you look at the time frame for when it was sent, because you're thinking, that doesn't make any sense, because look at the second half in which he had. But you wonder how successful his second half was, because the Jets essentially gave up and became a soft team in the second half. It's hard to comprehend what's going on with the Jets, because we were high on them to win the division. I know Kieran had his concerns, but they've got so many good players there, and even bringing in Davante Adams, for me, that's just another layer on top of other players. And Garrett Wilson now has been suggested as the odd man out, and even he's a trade candidate. There'll be teams wetting their lips to get their hands on Garrett Wilson, because in the right team and the right offense, he would work wonders. I'm not entirely sure where this Jets team are going to go now. They're going to go to Foxborough and win comfortably on Sunday, because the Patriots are there, and then the week after they got the Texans. I still think things are going to go amiss there in that particular game. It's hard to comprehend. They look for me like it was a Jets win all day long. At half time, I was taken back by the second half, and the nature of how soft they were in the second half. And now Russell Wilson to make big plays, and now Russell Wilson all of a sudden is Russell Wilson evolved. I think people need to pump the brakes on that slightly.
And that brings us to the end of our first segment of Week 7 Talking Points on the Irish NFL Show. I forgot to mention at the top of our segment of Talking Points, when we mentioned the 49ers, obviously that the curse of the watch party unfortunately remains undefeated. But 49ers faithful gathered in Buskers on the Ball in Temple Bar, our partners, Buskers on the Ball, €6 pints from 6 every NFL Sunday. Check it out. All I can say is 49ers faithful are going to have to keep going to Buskers on the Balls. There's no better excuse. They should have a watch party every week. Eventually they will beat the curse. We know they will, but it's been a tough run for them. We feel for them. Downed by the Chiefs, obviously, over the weekend. Another classic over the weekend, Noel, though, was the Lions taking the Minnesota Vikings undefeated record away from them. Bad turnover by Jared Goff, which brings Minnesota back into the game. They blew a double-digit lead in this game, the Lions, which we shouldn't forget about, but it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And the Lions came back and did what they needed to, just when they needed to do it to win that one. But a classic in M&T Bank Stadium.
No, it was. I think when we were talking about the games in the previews, Kieran had mentioned that he thought this was going to be a game that would be up there as being a really good, exciting game that people would talk about. And I think it turned out to be a really, really good, exciting game that, I'm looking forward to talking about here now. I mean, obviously it ends the way it ends. Two really good teams. The Vikings, 100% record. The Lions, some people Super Bowl favourites. And we got exactly what we thought we would get. For me, I watched this Lions team and that offense is awesome. When that offense gets going, those running backs can make a big difference. It was Gibbs this week that really stands out. Obviously, Montgomery has an injury, then he comes back in. He has the fumble. It looks like it may lose the game. But the Lions, this team is never beaten. You mentioned Goff earlier. I mean, in general, I think watching Goff this season has been amazing. I think he's been fantastic. I think he went 15 of 15 before.
I should say, no, like, I was giving out about him throwing that pick that brought the Vikings back into it, but that I'm doing him a disservice there because he was excellent all game long, and they kept putting the ball in his hands. He's thrown for 3rd and 9s, he's thrown for 3rd and long. The confidence is there in him and by him.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I was looking at some of the stats of what Brian Flores is bringing, and he blitzed more than he normally does. But Goff was just unflappable this weekend. He was getting rid of the ball. He was completing passes, and he wasn't getting flustered, which he has done in the past. Got flustered by a bit of pressure. This week, he just, there seems to be a renewed kind of vigor about him. He's just a really good player. The big question I had, obviously, you look at the defense of the Lions. They're missing Hutchinson, who is a top player that any team would miss, and I watched Brian Branch playing this weekend, and I think what a player to kind of step up and to drive that defense forward. It was so. Look, at the end of the day, it was two really good teams in an NFC North playoff or face-off. Both teams have really good players, and for me, the Lions have a stronger offense, which just kind of shone. You look at the Vikings. I mean, Sam Darnold's doing things I don't think any of us expected. We all thought he was washed, and he's still going. You know, the Vikings, we mentioned Brian Flores. He can do things to that defense. Aaron Jones running back can make a difference, and you know, Jefferson. But I think out of two really good teams, the better team, who I think really does have a great chance of a Super Bowl, that offense just took them and they ran with it. And I still think this offense has scope to get better. We haven't really seen Sam Laporta hit his stride yet, and we saw what he was like last season. So I think this Lions team is waiting to just even get better as they go forward. And you know, if I wasn't a Bears fan, it'd be a joy to watch them.
Brian, even among the plaudits that get heaped on the Lions, you know, we talk about Ben Johnson a lot, the offensive coordinator, and he rightly gets credit for his creativity and for what he's done rehabilitating Jared Goff's career. But it's actually probably Aaron Glenn, the Lions defensive coordinator, who showed strongly over the weekend, because he's got to deal with the loss of Aiden Hutchinson. As Noel reminded us there, the outstanding defensive player in the NFL this year has been probably streets ahead of almost anyone else in terms of what he's been able to do on the field. And Glenn coped with that really well. In fact, he took a bit of a page out of Brian Flores' book, very creative in terms of both the simulated pressure and then ratcheting up the blitz rate, you know, making sure that he threw something new at Sam Darnold. And, you know, Darnold didn't have a bad game, but it was a lot tougher for him than it's been so far this season. And that was really one of the keys to victory for Detroit. It wasn't just what was happening on the offensive side of the ball. Defense played their part without their best player.
Yeah, and like Darnold struggled for a number of times during the game, and you rightly called out that he was struggling in the sense we didn't know what was coming with him and what way they were kind of play calling. We spoke about the Vikings, how they have a nature of sending players up to the line for them to return back and, you know, find their way with interceptions and pick sixes and to that effect over the course. And yesterday, kind of similarities in terms of mixing it up, going after Sam Darnold. And I also felt he kept them in the game. There was early on, it looked like the Vikings might have got away from the Lions. You know, they're the ones that got out early with the lead, 10-0 up, and they found their way. They found their way back. There was times there where it looked like the Vikings may have got an opportunity to steam ahead, and not to be a big win. And you get other players who are now stepping up already. I'm concerned about that. Like, it's easy 1 week. It's consistently can do it over the course of 4 to 5 weeks. Hutchinson will be a factor. There's no way they're going to get away from that. We've seen them over the course of last week bringing in players, you know, on the free agency. You know, in terms of what's off the waiver wire, I'd be interested to see what they do in the coming weeks before the deadline. But a huge win. And I think the difference now, what we're seeing with this team is, we've seen in the past the Lions, as good as they've been, when they get in the situation where they're down by 3 late on, they don't find a way to navigate a victory. We saw yesterday, when they went down, I still felt they'd have enough. I still felt they'd get in that position to kick a game-winning field goal. And that's the difference. The team is evolving over the last couple of years with Dan Campbell, and it's kind of an acknowledgement that they go and win these games in tight situations. I think the Vikings are going to be fine, though. I think the Vikings, this strikes me as the kind of game we might see again in the playoffs. And you'd wonder how it would play out that time, because it was so close yesterday in the end.
Kieran, the position of best team in the NFC is up to play for, as we talked about, because the 49ers have been on the slide lately. you look at how the Lions, and I have to hold my hands up here and say I picked the Vikings to win this game because I was too clever for my own good. I thought, oh, the Lions are going to be coming off that big Cowboys victory. That's a bit of a come down. This is one of those games where it's going to be tough for them to replicate the same level of performance. But it's stacking these games that makes the difference between the real contenders and the also-rans, and that's what the Lions are doing right now.
Yeah, and they're learning to win the games that, back in the, the last couple of years, they'd be, you wouldn't be sure if they were going to do it. And the good thing is that, Campbell is still sticking true to what he does. He's still going for fourth downs. Some of the times, there was a play yesterday where they were about to go for it, and then it was I think it was a offside, or not, it was a false start. Something brought it back, so they ended up punting. But you almost thought they were going to go for it 4th and 6. So he's still got the chops. He's still got that energy. I mean, you saw the footage in the locker room afterwards. He just loves his team. He loves the game. He loves the team. He loves everything about it. He's in a great place. The Lions are in a great place. Now you've got, we've talked about the law firm of Gibbs and Montgomery. Now you have Sonic and Knuckles. That's what they want to go by. So, we got a brand new tandem, a brand new combo. I've said it plenty of times. They're just a joy to watch. And what was great about this game is that you knew it was going to be tight. You knew it was going to be back and forth, and you knew it was going to come down to a couple of points in the end. Both teams put on a phenomenal performance. Great offensive performance.
And Kieran, as you say it, I won't call him an unsung hero because that's massively overstating the case, but sometimes you kind of forget just how good Amon-Ra St. Brown is because he's playing in the same division as Justin Jefferson. He is amazing. Like some of the catches he makes when he's got defenders draped all over him, they're just outstanding.
Yeah, I mean, he's a star. I mean, he's an absolute stud out there. I mean, we've seen the show Receiver where you see all the stuff that drives him. He still thinks about the players picked before him in the draft, and he's still doing a couple of 100 catches all the time. I mean, that's muscle memory. That's just instinct. He's got it down to a fine art. He's a phenomenal player, a great temperament too. He's a winner, and he's perfect for Detroit. He's scrappy. He's determined. He fits the kind of dynamic of that city. And as does Campbell. I mean, it's a great story this year. And between the two teams yesterday, they put up a great. I mean, they're definitely going to see each other in January. I mean, just imagine what that's going to be like in Ford Field on a Sunday afternoon in January with everything to play for. Just a joy to watch. Great players all around. I mean, Branch. We talked earlier about Branch. What a player he is. I mean, he could end up being Defensive Player of the Year with that performance yesterday. Two great teams going. I mean. At this stage, yes, Lions took over number 1 spot for the week, but I mean they're very evenly matched and two great teams to watch.
No, the Bills were slow starting yesterday, and they beat the Titans in the end very easily. And you look at the way the Bills have been playing this season. We've kind of said it every season for the last couple of years about the Bills. This is the one where it catches up on them. This is the one where they slow down. And lo and behold, you look at them and they're battering teams by double digits when the mood takes them. Like, yeah, a little bit of a shaky start to the season, but they're now morphing into the genuine contenders that they've been all along for the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, look, write them off at your peril. Going into the season, I still thought they'd make it the wild card spot and they'd get to the playoffs, but I thought it would be tougher for them than it normally is. But look, when you've got Josh Allen there, he makes a big difference. He can go out there and whether it's on the ground or whether it's in the air, Josh Allen just drags that team on his shoulders. They obviously make a sign in Amari Cooper to come in to kind of lift a bit of pressure off, who gets his first touchdown, and that's going to bode well for them because I think they needed that experienced kind of wide receiver in there after losing Stephon Diggs last season. They just needed someone there who could lead that younger receiving team and have that bit of experience there. Although in saying that, Keon Coleman has a really good game yesterday. He puts up the yards, gets into the end zone. So yeah, look, this Bills team is a good team, but I mean, we know how important the quarterback position is. And when you have arguably the second best quarterback in the league, maybe for some it's not the second, it's the third, but he's definitely up there. He's always going to give you a chance. When you look at the Titans, I mean, I don't know what you make of this Titans team. For a while yesterday, it looks like maybe they can hold the lead for a while, but then they just seem to drop their heads. Which we've talked about them already. They make a change at quarterback, and they change it, and it still stays the same. So they've a lot of problems kind of inherent there in that team. But the Bills, yeah, this team can cause anyone a problem on their day. I'll watch them, and I'll still wonder if they have enough to go the full way, but as I said, with Josh Allen, they could certainly do something in the playoffs, and it'll be interesting to see how far they can actually push it.
For your namesake, Brian Callahan, it's been tough in Tennessee, Brian. Not quite how a lot of people, including ourselves in the show, thought that it might be. Will Levis hasn't really shown any sign of morphing into an NFL starting quarterback. And when your backup option is Mason Rudolph, there's no fireworks coming off the bench either.
Yeah, there's some examples on social media today. I'm always conscious you see one particular play and people are drilling into the scenario of a play and you don't see the bigger landscape of the team and how poor they are. They were showing certain plays in which Rudolph was putting it into the grasp of their wide receivers and they're all dropping the ball. And I suppose the narrative was, it doesn't matter who's back there, taking the snap at QB. If the wide receivers aren't going to hold their end of the bargain, what hope do you got? And yet they still found the way to kind of get into an early lead. And like this team, they've got some players, and it's just unfortunate this situation. Like we look at their record, they should have won some other games because of the quarterback situation. Tony Pollard has had a better season than people would have expected, but just can't hold their own. And when they're up against an upper weight class in the likes of Buffalo, unfortunately, this is what we're going to see from this team. Fight. And I think they are fighting for the head coach. I don't think it's a situation that this team isn't playing for the head coach. I just think they just can't. They can't succeed at this level against the likes of the Bills. And these teams are for the Bills. I think the Bills, for me, are a little bit complacent in these type of games. They were in week 1 for me against the Cardinals. Started slowly, came back, started slowly yesterday. The Bills have lost to the Ravens. They've lost to the Texans. They are the teams that ultimately they're going to have to come up against come January and beat. And that's what concerns me about this team. Now it's called it out. He's not entirely convinced they can go up against the upper echelons and beat them. That's how I feel about them. They'll take care against teams the likes of Titans, but can they really deliver come January? For the Titans, it's just one of those seasons, unfortunately. They're gonna be here come January looking at this draft board and I'm wondering, is the quarterback of the future here? Because it certainly isn't on the roster right now.
Kieran, talk to us about the Titans.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick point on the Titans. I'm hesitant to say players quit, but you've got star players out there. Tony Pollard, not going to criticize his performance, but Calvin Ridley had 3 catches for 42 yards. DeAndre Hopkins, -2 yards, 1 catch, -2 yards. That's all they contributed. And after, they did start fairly respectably. But the second half, Bills went into overdrive. I mean, 5 straight drives, 3 touchdowns and 2 field goals. I don't want to say players stop playing hard. I'm not going to say that because I'm not in that position. But, ending up 34-10, there's got to have to be a lot of soul searching with Tennessee to see how the game got out of hand that quickly, because they were in contention for a large part of that game. But, I mean, whether it's the Bills blowing the doors off or certain players just, saying, you know what, I'm making a business decision, that classic 2024 phrase. But it's dire in Tennessee. That's a team that is dangerously teetering. And with the Levis situation, yes, he was classed as being, that was the phrase was he was injured. If they were on a fairly good patch of a performance, we would have seen him out there. And like Brian said, Mason Rudolph, when you put him out there, I mean, you're almost waving the white flag. Very little chance for the Titans, but they didn't help themselves at all.
Brian, let's talk about the Colts, and we'll get to the Rams in a minute. We wanted to single out 2 teams, one in each conference, that both had sloppy wins at the weekend. Both are still in the conversation potentially for a wild card. And we mentioned the NFC West a little bit earlier on, where the Rams actually not even out of contention for the division, never mind a wild card with the way that division has gone. But from a Colts perspective, that win over the Dolphins, who unfortunately without Tua must be one of the least watchable teams in the league right now. We can maybe talk about them another time. But from an Indianapolis point of view, Richardson didn't look great. Fairness to him, he made a couple of strong plays with his legs later on, but some of the fireworks that we saw earlier on the season and before he got injured last season are not there. If he's not hitting those deep balls and showing us that cannon down the field, he's not able to work the ball, not able to work the field in the way that you would hope a player at his stage of his development would show us that he can do. And it's not the easiest thing to watch, and you'd wonder what way they're going, because it's a talented roster. They should have decent aspirations for this season. The wild card should be achievable. Will it?
Not for me. Not the way in which they're going about this season. Like, you could argue that Richardson is essentially on his rookie year because he only played 4 games last year, and even the games in which he was playing early on last season, he didn't seem to be, fully understand the nature of the beast, and he was going in with his head first and so many times and getting injured. Ultimately, that's what led to the season-ending injury. And the same situation yesterday. We spoke about this over the course of the last fortnight. They're putting them in situations where are they trying to get him killed? Because it's just like run after run after run. It's like the only effective thing we can do right now because he can't deliver the long ball. He's inconsistent with his passing, and they're struggling. And right now, like, people won't want to hear it in terms of people who want to see young quarterbacks coming into the league. But Joe Flacco gives this team the best opportunity to win, in my opinion. Yesterday, that game should have been won by the Dolphins. The Dolphins fumbled twice in the red zone. They missed a game-tying field goal to put the game into overtime. The Dolphins, throughout the course of the game, I wouldn't say they looked comfortable, but they were the ones moving the ball throughout the course of the game. It was sloppy by the Colts, and they found a way to get over the line, and they win.
I'm seeing a conspiracy here, Brian, where maybe Steichen is dialing up those running plays because he's trying to knock Richardson out of the game so he can have the excuse to bring Flacco in.
You'd have to wonder because, like, I get the nature of who he is and why people look at him in that Cam Newton type of situation. But I don't think the Panthers, in the glory days of the Panthers, put Cam Newton in too many positions where they were continuously dialing up run-pass option plays. Cam Newton could do it. Cam Newton look for the pass, look for the second read, then he'll take off and take off at the appropriate moments. And that's why he was such an effective quarterback, similar to what Lamar Jackson, I suppose, has come to do now over the course of the last 2 years. Remain patient. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing dial play up, run play, and off you go. And that the longevity of that is just not sustainable. They were sloppy, they got over the line. They were sloppy last week, and they got over the line against the Titans. But I'd be surprised if they make the playoffs the way they're playing at the moment. But again, unless they can find ways to navigate victories in a division right now, let's be fair, like the Texans have lost it. It looks like it's the Texans to take hold of. I know Shane selected the Colts to win the division. They could make a late run and make the playoffs, but I just think there's better teams for more pressing needs in terms of making the playoffs this year in the AFC than this Colts team.
Noel, the Rams are 2-4 now after taking down the Raiders over the weekend. We've talked at length about the injury list there, which is as long as your arm and is one of the more unfortunate situations in the league at the moment. But they've got the quarterback, they've got the coach, they have some players. And with the way that division is shaping up, again, we mentioned it briefly again just there. The NFC West is a competitive division, albeit for all the wrong reasons. And the Rams aren't out of touch.
No, they're not. And that's surprising, given where we thought they might have been a couple of weeks ago when we saw the injuries and results they were getting. I don't think any of us would have given them a chance at all of being anywhere close in this division. But as you say, things have shaken out. The Seahawks can lose 3 games on the trot and still find themselves top of the division now. So, look, who knows? I mean, obviously the Rams, you mentioned injuries. I think they look good on defense. They have some good young players in there who are making a big difference. And you mentioned Matt Stafford too. When he's on form, he can make something from nothing. But I don't know. I mean, I think they made a hard work of the Raiders yesterday. I think there's some games the Rams are going to lose. I think those injuries will still count against them in the long term. I'm still not convinced by them. I know obviously there's reasons for that. There are injuries there, but I don't think they have enough going forward. But then who knows? This division is just constantly this season throwing up strange results and strange storylines. So maybe they'll take advantage of that and go ahead and run with it. But I'm not convinced by them until they can get a few players back and maybe look a little bit more solid. I think they'll probably have weeks where they'll get a good win or two and weeks where they'll probably lose a game until they're a bit more solidified.
Kieran, call it first. Are either of these teams, the Rams or the Colts, going to make the wild card, do you think?
I like the Rams. I think they did, it was very sloppy yesterday. Very, very sloppy. Stafford, was picked off and, he almost injured himself making a tackle towards the end. But they're I don't want to say they're treading water because they're too far behind for that. But we remember last year, they were counted out around this time. It was late October into November, and they went on that big run. So I'm not counting them out yet. They're going to start having Cooper Kupp coming back pretty soon. The O-line is.
Let's not forget that in their Super Bowl season, they didn't win a game the whole month of November.
Right, and they're starting to gradually patch that O-line together again. And some of those devastating injuries some of them are coming back in the next couple of weeks. You still got Stafford, but the X factor for me is Kyren Williams. That's 9 straight games now with a touchdown. And when you have him out there, I mean, anything can happen. You got every week that goes on, the Rams are just adding it piece by piece. Roseboom came back yesterday. Stafford can still make plays out there. But Kyron Williams for me is going to keep them in the hunt, despite the fact that they're 2-4. I would have much more faith in them than the Colts. I don't like much about what the Colts are doing. I think Richardson is still in the development stages. Again, like Brian said, he is not that quintessential running back or quarterback that can throw his body around the way he does. And I think Flacco would have been a much better addition for them yesterday. So I like the Rams. I've much more faith in the Rams making the wild card.
Brian, Shane Steichen might be forgiven for thinking, I wish what happened to Deshaun Watson would happen here so I could play the quarterback that I might actually want to play. That's a very ungenerous thought that I'm putting on Shane Steichen there. But Deshaun Watson gone for the season now. It's been confirmed he ruptured his Achilles. This whole affair is going to have a documentary in it. I know you're cringing, waiting for me to go off on one about Deshaun Watson. He is who he is. Go and read the court papers if you want to know what kind of man Deshaun Watson is. He's had a terrible season, and this was drama of the highest order, not only in terms of what happened to him, but in terms of the crowd reaction, both before he got injured and after he got injured. It's very, very, very rare. I can't think of any instance where you'll see fans booing when a player gets injured like that. It's the last thing that anyone will wish on anyone. But Deshaun Watson has put himself in that unwanted scenario, and his own teammates, to be fair to them, reacted in the way they did because this is a guy that they share a locker room with. But it's fascinating in all different aspects of it.
Yeah, and it's hard not to get into the storyline that actually has evolved since the game, which is the players and how the players have come out in this support, and they're disgusted by the nature of the reaction from the fans. And there's a few clips today, and I think one of them was probably the one that summed it up best. Was I think the fans, the ones that were applauding because they were delighted that he was no longer going to be the quarterback because of the play. It's not necessarily because of what's gone on off the field. It's because he has not played to the level in which he demands a contract of $78 million of a cap hit for this team next year, which is it's bananas when you think about it. They can't do anything with him. He's out injured, but they might have a glimmer of light because the rookie now is gone. Obviously, not the rookie; he's in the second year. But Jameis Winston will probably have to come in, and they probably will get an opportunity to play better, maybe play better offensively and win games. And they've got Chubb coming back, who scored a touchdown yesterday. So maybe there is better days ahead offensively in terms of the performance. But the bigger story, unfortunately, is that the players have come out in support, and it was telling over the course of last week because you're watching the body language when the players on the field over the course of the last month, and that's not what I expected in the reaction. That some of them were, looked very off-putting in terms of how they reacted to him on the field. And obviously they've come out yesterday and said certain things after the game, and today people have pushed back on it because it's not valid and it's not fair and it doesn't reflect well on them either. But this Browns team are probably a team of all the teams in the league that are wishing the season was over already, and that's unfortunate because we haven't even hit November and we haven't even hit Tankathon period. But that's where this team is. The Bengals yesterday, the flip side for them is that was a must-win for them, and they haven't had a great success there over the course of the last few years. I think Kieran called it out 1 win in 9 or something to that effect. So big win for them, and they're starting to roll now and get back into the picture for the wildcards.
Kieran, there was a back and forth on a WhatsApp group I'm on over the weekend about whether the Deshaun Watson trade is actually the worst trade in NFL history. You can think Herschel Walker is one for the team that was on the receiving end of it, the Vikings at the time, but it's hard to think of a worse example because of the way this has ended, because of all that guaranteed money now flushed down the toilet for a guy who really showed very little of anything of the reasons that convinced the Browns to do that in the first place.
Yeah, top of my head, the only one I could think of was Ricky Williams way back in the day with Ditka. That was a bizarre one, but it wasn't anywhere near the money or the consequences of the Watson trade. I mean, this is, like Brian said, the fans are booing because they're tired of seeing the same stuff on the field every week. Booing a player who is injured or who has been knocked around is nothing new. I mean, the Giants fans booed Sims. Jets fans applauded when Sanchez got injured and had to go off the field. People forget Matt Castle before Mahomes got there was getting the bird. It's nothing new. And we shouldn't really be surprised that players are going to come out and defend Watson because that's that NFL brotherhood. They're not going to dump on him. They're going to have his back because he's in the fraternity. And I'm not surprised by the comments made by Jameis, bizarre as they may be, or even Myles Garrett. But, what does anyone really think they're going to say? They're going to back up their brother. And NFL players there are some very questionable characters.
That's what I was going to say, Kara. Yeah, obviously there are, but I mean, at one level, if you're watching the sport and you're seeing some of the characters that we've seen traipse in and out, you can't be surprised that anyone in there in the locker room is going to say that, A, because you wouldn't know what skeletons some of them have in the closet themselves, or the fear they might have that they might one day be in a similar situation to that because of the way some of them live their lives. And B, even if everyone in that locker room hated Deshaun Watson, you're not going to dump on a guy that you share a locker room with because you've just broken the whole spirit of the team if you do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the players, they don't really care who's behind center because they just want to win, and they're not going to win with Watson, and they're not going to win without Watson. And the kicker is they're stuck with him for years. That's what Browns fans waking up today are going to have to realize. No team is going to touch that contract, not even the Canadian Football League. So they're stuck with Watson for at least another year, if not two, and who knows, it may be even longer. So they've either got to make it work or eat all that money. They can't even eat that money. So that's the realization for Browns fans. And if you're forking out that money and you're sitting up there in the stands watching that, and you're frustrated week on week watching a terrible product, then you are gonna, you're gonna applaud a change. And they didn't know what kind of injury it was. They didn't know he was going to be out for the year. They didn't know it was, an Achilles rupture. So they're just scrambling and desperate for any kind of change. And the situation, when you sit back and think about it and look at all the details around the trade, what was Haslam thinking? I mean, it's absolutely bizarre to put yourself and your franchise in that much of a hole and mortgage the future to that extent. It's just bizarre. And it's dark days for the Browns. I mean, we talk about the Giants.
I'll tell you who the happiest man in football is right now is Arthur Blank. He was prepared to do that. Let's not forget.
And a lot of teams were prepared to do that. A lot of teams were prepared to back the truck up and pay him all that money. The Browns ended up doing it. And I mean, they're going to make 30 for 30s about that in about 5 or 6 years, about the absolute fallout from this just crazy contract.
Yeah, even the Jets wouldn't do that, right? That brings us to the end of our week 7 talking points. Don't forget, we got 2 more games to go. The Monday night doubleheader sees the Bucs play the Ravens and the Cardinals play the Chargers. Don't forget to check out our Monday Night Football preview podcast if you haven't already. That's us for now. We'll be back on Thursday as we preview the Week 8 matchups.